The judges stood in stunned silence. 43 entries, and nothing came close. Elena Reyes, 26 years old, watched them examine her apples under the pavilion lights at the Tehama County Fair. September 21, 2024. The fruit glowed amber red, each one identical in size, the skin taut and unblemished. Judge Morrison, who'd been evaluating fruit for 30 years, turned one over in his hands like it was glass. "Where did these come from?" "My orchard," Elena said quietly. "North of Corning." "Which orchard?" "The old Brennan place." Morrison's expression changed. "That orchard's been dead for 5 years." "Yes, sir," the other judges whispered. Everyone in Tehama County knew the Brennan orchard. 200 trees abandoned after the old man died, left to disease and neglect. A graveyard of split bark and canker rot visible from Highway 99. Morrison set the apple down carefully. "We'll need to verify the source before we can award the ribbon." Elena nodded. She'd expected this. 7 months earlier, the auction was in the parking lot of the Corning Community Center, February 14, 2024, 9 in the morning. Property 012-180-067, 18 acres, including a 1940s farmhouse with foundation issues and an apple orchard last commercially harvested in 2018. The auctioneer, a woman named Patricia Shields, stood on a folding table. "Orchard's got fire blight, canker, woolly aphid infestation. Inspection reports available. House needs a new roof. Do I hear $15,000? Elena held a cashier's check for $16,200. Everything from her grandfather's life insurance policy after the funeral expenses were paid. Around her, a handful of developers checked their phones, bored. The land had value. The orchard didn't. $15,000, she said. A developer in a polo shirt glanced at her, raised his paddle. 16, 17, Elena said. He looked at the inspection report, shrugged, lowered his paddle. The gavel fell. She signed the deed in Patricia's car, paperwork spread across the dashboard. Patricia pushed her glasses up. "You know what you're buying?" "I do. Those trees haven't been pruned in 6 years. They're diseased. Most people would bulldoze and replant." "I know," Elena said. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Your grandfather was Miguel Reyes?" "Yes. He worked the Brennan orchard back in the 80s. I remember him. Best pruner in the county." She paused. "This is sentimental, isn't it?" Elena didn't answer directly. Her grandfather had worked the Brennan orchard for 11 years, taught her to prune when she was 8 years old, his rough hands over hers on the shears, showing her how to read a tree's energy, where to cut, what to leave. He'd lost that job when Mr. Brennan sold to a management company that brought in cheaper labor. Grandpa Miguel worked other orchards after that, saved every dollar, died at 71 with $16,200 in a savings account and a lockbox under his bed. Inside the lockbox, his pruning shears, Japanese steel, 50 years old. A folded diagram on graph paper showing the structure of a perfect apple tree. And a letter in Spanish, his handwriting shaky. The trees remember their shape. Everyone cuts too much or too little. The secret is in the first prune of spring, one cut that opens the center to light and air. Find the central leader. Find the competing branch. Choose correctly, and the tree will heal itself. Choose wrong, and disease wins. I'm leaving you the tools and the knowledge. The Brennan orchard was the best I ever worked. If you ever get the chance, save it. Make them beautiful again. She drove out to the property that afternoon in her 2003 Honda Civic with 198,000 miles. The orchard was worse than the inspection report suggested. 200 trees in 20 rows, limbs crossing and rubbing, bark split and weeping amber sap, black cankers spreading like burn marks, dead branches tangled in living ones. The ground was thick with unmowed grass and fallen fruit from years past, rotting, feeding disease. The house was a separate problem, peeling paint, sagging. Porch, kitchen ceiling stained brown from roof leaks. She'd deal with that later. She walked the orchard until sunset, stopping at each tree, looking at the structure beneath the chaos. Her grandfather's voice in her memory. Every tree wants to grow correctly. Our job is to help it remember how. That night, she slept in the Civic and studied the diagram by flashlight. The drawing showed a tree's ideal form. Central leader vertical, scaffold branches angled at 45 degrees. The center open like a vase to let light reach the interior fruit. Below the diagram, Her grandfather's notes. First prune, late February, before bud break. Find the central leader. Remove the strongest competitor. One cut. The tree will redistribute energy correctly. Trust this. February 24th, she started pruning. 6 a.m., frost still on the ground, her grandfather's shears in her hand. The first tree was a disaster. 3 main limbs fighting for dominance, all nearly equal in size, the center dark and tangled. She studied it for 20 minutes. The central leader was slightly thicker, more vertical. The competing branch was vigorous, strong, drawing energy away. According to every modern guide, you'd make dozens of cuts, thin the canopy, remove crossing branches, cut back disease. Her grandfather's method was different. Radical. One cut. She positioned the shears at the base of the competing branch and cut clean through. 3 inches in diameter. The branch fell away. The tree looked naked, unbalanced. Wrong. She moved to the next tree. The neighbors came to watch her fail. By March 3rd, Elena had pruned 40 trees using her grandfather's method, 1 major cut per tree, removing the central leader's strongest competitor, leaving everything else untouched. The orchard looked worse than before. Piles of thick branches stacked at the row ends. The remaining canopies still dense with dead wood and crossing limbs. Richard Kohler, who owned the commercial orchard to the east, stopped his truck at her fence line. He was maybe 60, sunburned, with permanent squint lines. His operation was 200 acres of modern high-density planting. You're the one who bought the Brennan place? Yes, sir. He looked at the prune trees, then at the pile of cut branches. What the hell kind of pruning is that? My grandfather's method. Your grandfather leave you pruning instructions from the 1950s? He laughed, but it wasn't mean. You can't just cut 1 big branch and call it done. Those trees are diseased. You need to remove all the dead wood. Thin the canopy, treat for fire blight. I will, Elena said. After the first flush. First flush? You'll be pruning in July. His expression shifted to pity. Look, I don't know what you paid, but those trees are done. You should bulldoze, fumigate, replant with modern rootstock. I can give you a contractor's number. Thank you. I'm going to try this first. He shook his head. Your funeral, but when you're ready to sell, call me. I'll give you a fair price for the land. After he left, she kept working. The pruning took 3 weeks. 200 trees, 1 major cut each. Her hands blistering even through gloves, her shoulders burning. She worked alone because she couldn't afford help and because she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The county agricultural commissioner arrived on March 18th. Someone had filed a report about the diseased orchard. Commissioner Janet C. Yao, mid-40s, kind face, serious eyes. She walked the rows with a clipboard. Miss Reyes, you have active fire blight cankers on approximately 60% of these trees. State regulations require treatment or removal. I'm treating them. How? Elena explained the pruning method, opening the center to light and air, allowing the tree to redirect energy, strengthening its natural defenses. Ciao listened patiently. That's not treatment. That's optimism. Fire blight is bacterial. It spreads. You need antibiotic sprays at minimum, and honestly, most of these trees should be removed. Can I have until June? If the disease is spreading then, I'll remove them. Ciao looked at her for a long moment. Your grandfather was Miguel Reyes. Yes. I met him once at a pruning demonstration in 2008. He did things differently than everyone else, but his trees always produced. She clicked her pen. I'll give you until June 15th. But if I see spread, we'll have to take action. This disease can jump to neighboring orchards. I understand. Thank you. By April, the trees began to respond. Elena walked the orchard every morning, watching. The prune trees pushed new growth from the central leader, vigorous, vertical shoots reaching for light. The energy that had been split between competing branches was now focused, concentrated. The canopies began to open naturally as the central leader dominated, shading out the weaker interior growth. And something else happened. The fire blight cankers stopped weeping. The bark around the infections began to callus, forming barriers. Not healing. Not yet, but contained, isolated. The tree's immune response finally strong enough to wall off the disease. She started the second round of pruning in mid-April, removing dead wood, thinning crossing branches, cutting out the cankers with sterilized shears, painting the wounds with Bordeaux mixture. This was the detail work her grandfather had written about. The cleanup after the tree's energy was corrected. Richard Kohler drove by in late April and slowed down, but didn't stop. She saw him looking at the trees, at the new growth, his expression unreadable. May brought the first real test. Bloom. Apple trees bloom before they leaf out fully, the flowers appearing on last year's wood. Elena's trees should have bloomed weakly or not at all. They were diseased, stressed, abandoned. But on May 8th, the orchard exploded white and pink. Thousands of blossoms, clusters of 5, the scent like honey and almonds. She walked the rows at sunrise and cried. Just stood there among the blooming trees and cried because her grandfather had been right, because the trees had remembered, because beauty could come from something everyone said was dead. The pollinators came, bees from Kohler's hives next door, wild bees, wasps, hoverflies. The weather cooperated. The bloom was heavy and the set was good. Tiny green fruit forming where the flowers had been. By June, Commissioner Xiao returned for her inspection. Elena met her at the gate, stomach tight. Xiao walked every row, checking the tad trees that had shown active blight. She examined the cankers, the new growth, the developing fruit. She didn't speak. Finally, at the last row, she turned to Elena. The infection rate is down by 70%. The active cankers have been compartmentalized. The trees are producing. She shook her head slowly. I don't know how, but whatever you did worked. My grandfather knew, Elena said quietly. Then your grandfather was remarkable. Xiao made notes on her clipboard. You're in compliance. I'll remove the watch order. The fruit sized up through June and July. Elena thinned by hand, 1 apple per cluster, giving each fruit room to grow and color. She irrigated carefully, installed drip lines she couldn't afford on a credit card. The trees responded like they'd been waiting for someone to care. By August, the apples were remarkable. Elena walked the orchard on August 12th, examining fruit that had swelled to full size, still green, but beginning to show color breaks, streaks of red on the sunny side. The flesh was firm, the shape symmetrical. No disease scars. No insect damage. Just clean, beautiful fruit on trees that had been left for dead. She picked one early apple, bit into it. The flesh was white, crisp, tart-sweet. Proper fruit, not the soft, bland supermarket taste. Heirloom variety, probably Gravenstein or an old California strain Mr. Brennan had planted in the 40s. Richard Kohler pulled up that afternoon, got out of his truck, walked straight to the nearest tree, examined an apple, then looked at Elena with an expression she couldn't read. I need to apologize, he said. No, sir, yes. I mocked you. In my head, if not out loud. I thought you were a kid with romantic ideas and no sense. He touched one of the apples gently. These trees were finished. Everyone knew it. I was going to buy this land cheap and bulldoze it. I got lucky, Elena said. That's not luck. That's knowledge. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. I've got 40 trees in my south section with the same canker problem you had. I've been treating with antibiotics, burning out cankers, losing ground every year. Would you teach me your grandfather's method? Elena felt something settle in her chest. Yes. She spent 2 days at Kohler's orchard, teaching him to read the tree's structure, showing him how to identify the central leader and its strongest competitor, explaining the energy dynamics. He was a good student, asked questions, took notes, didn't assume he knew better. Why doesn't anyone teach this? He asked. It's slow, Elena said. It requires patience and faith that the tree knows what to do. The industry wants fast solutions. Chemicals. New varieties. Sometimes the old ways still work. By late August, she'd consulted for 3 more orchards. Word spread quietly among the older growers, the ones who remembered when pruning was an art, not just production management. She charged $200 a day when people could pay. Sometimes she worked for free. The harvest began September 1st. Elena picked by hand, each apple examined and placed carefully in bins. She worked dawn to dark, sleeping in the farmhouse now, the roof patched with tar paper, the kitchen ceiling still stained but dry. The fruit kept coming. 200 trees, each one producing. She delivered her first load to the Corning Farmers Market on September 7th, set up a small stand, handwritten sign, Brennan Orchard Apples, $3 per lb. People stopped, skeptical. The Brennan Orchard's dead. Not anymore, Elena said. They bought cautiously at first. Then they tasted. The old flavor, The proper texture, the way apples used to be. By noon she was sold out. 42 pounds at $3 each. Richard Kohler stopped by her stand the following week. You should enter the county fair. The commercial apple division. Competitions September 21st. I'm not commercial scale, doesn't matter. Quality division. You've got the best apples in the county. She almost didn't enter. But on September 19th, she picked her best fruit. 10 apples, identical in size, perfect color, flawless skin, and drove them to the fairgrounds. Now she stood in the pavilion, watching the judges deliberate. Morrison had returned from his phone call. We verified the source, he said. Drove out to the property. Those trees. He shook his head. I inspected that orchard 4 years ago for the Brennan estate. It was finished. I don't know what you did, but this is the finest fruit we've seen in a decade. The announcement came at 3 p.m., over the loudspeaker, in front of maybe 200 people. Elena stood in her clean jeans and white shirt, hands shaking slightly. Best in show, commercial apple division. Elena Reyes, Brennan Orchard. The applause was scattered at first, then louder. Richard Kohler was there, clapping hard. Commissioner C.O. Some of the farmers she'd helped. The old-timers who remembered her grandfather. Morrison pinned the blue ribbon to her shirt and shook her hand. Your grandfather would be proud. He already is, Elena said quietly. That evening, she drove back to the orchard and walked the rows as the sun set. The trees were half-harvested, limbs still heavy with fruit, the canopies open and healthy, shaped like her grandfather's diagram. Light filtering through to the ground. The disease contained, the structure corrected, the old beauty restored. She sat on the porch of the farmhouse, still shabby, still needing work, but hers, and opened her grandfather's letter one more time. Make them beautiful again. She had. Not by force or chemicals or replacement. Just by one careful cut, made with knowledge and faith, that let each tree remember what it was supposed to be. The blue ribbon was pinned to her shirt. The orchard was alive. And tomorrow, she'd harvest again. Elena smiled, folded the letter carefully, and watched the last light fade over 200 trees that everyone said were dead, but that had simply been waiting for someone who knew how to help them heal.